The following is a production of Dan Perkins Media.
Dan Perkins Media presents a unique and exciting program. Truth Starts Now, a conversation with Dan Perkins. The left has taken away your rights to freedom of speech. Truth Starts Now is a platform for you to regain your voice. America and Americans will be better off if we can have civil and respectful conversations about the day's important issues. Now, here's your host, Dan Perkins.
Hello and welcome. This is Dan Perkins, and this is The Truth Starts Now. Today we have a special program that will be important to everybody to see. So here we go. Is a word salad an alternative to saying early onset dementia? I understand that many suggestions of the possibility of young onset dementia of the vice president may be unsettling. The Mayo Clinic reports about 110 of every 100,000 adults between the ages of 30 and 64 have young onset Alzheimer's. In their book, Understanding Young Onset Dementia, authors Voigt and Carter report, quote, based on a few existing studies, the prevalence of dementia at a younger age under 65 can be estimated between 68.2 and 85.5 per 100,000 people, although these numbers will vary from country to country around the world. According to the Alzheimer's Association, in both groups under 65 and over 65, the percentage of people having dementia is very close. I have done a great deal of research on the symptoms of young onset dementia. Osaka American Pharmaceuticals has compiled a report of the symptoms of young onset. It should be noted that people are different, and not all symptoms will be experienced by all people. The three major categories are verbal aggression, physical aggression, and restlessness. I have no knowledge of activities in the second and third categories as they relate to the premise of this article and the VP. However, I am aware of many stories in the media about her behavior dealing with verbal aggression. The following are titles of published stories that illustrate the vice president's behavior, and I believe they all should be read. Regardless of whether you believe the story or not, do your own homework. Politico had a story titled Not a Healthy Environment, end of story. Politico had a story, quote, not a healthy environment, end of quote. Kamala Harris' office is rife with dissent. Aides and administration's officials say that the vice president's office is dysfunctional and it emanates from the top. Business Insider had an article by a former Kamala Harris staffer who says the aides must endure a constant amount of soul-destroying criticism. The Daily Express published an article saying Kamala Harris labeled soul-destroying bully. I'm going to say that again, soul-destroying bully by a former staff due to the toxic behavior. And finally, the Boston Times, a former staffer of Vice President Kamala Harris, have come forward with allegations that she is a, quote, bully, end quote, who frequently berates her employees in degrading tirades, leaving many in tears. These accusations were made to an author for the UK Daily Mail and reveal an astonishing 92% of staff turnover rate during Harris's first year in office. All the above and many more that I don't have room for are examples of behavior you would find with someone who might be suffering with young onset dementia. It is important to consider the possibility from a different perspective, one that takes into account the potential health issue of a public figure. Harris exhibits two other symptoms of young onset dementia. First is her laugh, or what is often referred to as a cackle. Laughing at an inappropriate time is another sign of young onset dementia. We have seen her cackle on many occasions, and sometimes you have wondered, why is she doing this? The second symptom is an odd movements of her hands to her face. Go look at the split screen of her debate with Trump And look at the unusual gestures with her hands to her face. Moving on. Harris's first solo interview proves the candidate is unprepared for office, say online critics. I have included a link to the interview that Ms. Harris did with Brian Taft last week. The interview lasted just over 11 minutes. Brian asked VP Harris, quote, "What will you do to reduce the price of food and make life more affordable in America?" She spoke for 11 minutes and didn't have anything to recommend that she could bring down prices and make life in America more affordable today. She is not dealing with the reality of her recommendations. She said, quote, she wanted to give the people a $50,000 tax credit to start a new business. You must have taxable income to use a tax credit. According to the SBA, most businesses don't make any profit in their first year of business. In fact, most new businesses need at least 18 to 24 months to reach profitability. And then there's the reality that 25% of new businesses fail in the first year, according to the Small Business Administration. Her 11-minute answer needed to be more responsive to Brian's question and to the American people. He was looking for an answer to what she would do today to fix the problem. Her answer could have been more responsive and was more like an 11-minute word salad that was not in touch with reality of millions of Americans suffering and can't wait years for a solution. I suggest that you read these articles noted above and watch the interview. Then ask yourself if the Democratic candidate for president is not doing interviews because the staff is hiding her, much like she did to hide Biden's dementia from the American people. One last thought. Harris wanted to increase the child tax credit to $6,000. Like a small business tax credit, you have to have money to buy the things that you need for a child's first year, and then file your return to get reimbursed with the credit. Because she does not seem to deal with the reality, perhaps that American people should demand Harris take a memory test before the election. Both of her proposals show that our vice president has never run a business and never raised children, and she's making the plans that are unrealistic. This is Dan Perkins.
That sound of the emergency squad happens 34 times per hour, 24/7 in the United States, carrying someone who is dying from a drug overdose to the ER. 70% of these runs are people are dying from the vicious drug called fentanyl. Over the last 10 years, 1 million Americans have died from fentanyl. In 2019, 112,000 children ages 12 and 13 were on opioids. The fentanyl overdose rates are rising 2.5 times faster than that of heroin. Now there is an FDA-approved test for the presence of fentanyl in the system. The test is safe, simple, and 99.5% accurate. In just 5 minutes, you can find out if your child, loved one, or employee is using fentanyl. If you want to save someone's life, go to thefentanyltest.com and learn more about this dangerous drug and how you can get your 5-minute test and keep your child out of that squad.
Thanks for listening to the show today. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you'd like to send a comment, please do so by sending it to Dan at danperkinsmedia.org. That's Dan at danperkinsmedia.org. And thanks for listening.